Hey YouTube, it's Tori from Thunderbird Comics, and I'm coming to you with Thunderbird Thursday. Toni and I are going to answer some of the questions that we've received through our Facebook page that we asked, what are the questions that you have? This is a brand new project. We don't have a lot of info out about it yet, and we thought that the best way to get the information out would be to say, hey, what do you want to know? So this is our starting point for a question and answer video. Toni and I are going to be answering some questions. And if you have a question that didn't get answered, please leave it in the comments. We'll do these videos again. These are going to be a big feature for Thunderbird Thursday, these question and answers. And as soon as we get up and running with Patreon, we'll also be doing Google Hangouts where you can answer these questions or ask these questions and get them answered. And we'll be putting those up on our Patreon feed as well. And they'll eventually make it to YouTube, but they're going to be available for our patrons first. So let's start off. I got some really good questions. What inspired the project? I have always been interested in the supernatural, and the legend of the Thunderbird is featured prominently in many Native American mythos. But there is a local legend of the Tombstone Thunderbird in this area that's been swirling around in my mind for quite a while. The legend is that two prospectors left out from Tombstone and rode over to the Whetstone Mountain area to look for silver, copper, whatever they could find, and were almost attacked by a giant thunderbird. Now, in this particular legend, this was more of a pterodactyl type thunderbird. They're usually portrayed in Native American mythology as a giant bird with feathers, but this was more of a leathery pterodactyl type of creature. So they shot the thing out of the sky, and of course it was too big for them to take back to Tombstone on their horses. So legend has it that they cut off part of the wing, went back to Tombstone. They told their story. Everyone, of course, got super excited. They all mounted up and rode out, and by the time that they got to the place where the body was supposed to be, the creature was gone. Now, another aspect of the legend is that supposedly the story and even a picture of this creature ran in the newspaper, the Tombstone Epitaph. There people that swear to this day they saw the article, they saw the picture, it was true, but no evidence has ever been found. No authentic pictures. There have been some recreated pictures for TV shows and ones that people made themselves, but there's no authentic pictures, and there's no record of that story running in the epitaph. I believe the year was 1889 that this happened. There's no records of it, but it's an interesting story. It's a story that persists kind of around the urban legends to this day, and I've always thought it was interesting. I researched that story about 2 years ago to write a short story. Never got anywhere in it, but it kind of percolated in my head, and as story ideas tend to do, when you leave them alone long enough, it turned into something else. And the something else is this Thunderbird comic. I was writing it as a novel or a series of novellas, which is something I've done before at a more young adult story level. This is a very much a more mature story. But the more that I wrote, the more that I plotted it out in my head, the more I really thought, I wish I could show this to people, not just tell them about it. Like, this would be a great thing. You know what? I could do a comic book. It's too bad I don't know anyone who was an artist. Oh, wait, I do know someone who was an artist. So I got a hold of Toni, who I've known pretty much her whole life, who is a fantastic artist. And she agreed to do this project on just for love. We have not gotten any money, any advance. We're doing this on our own. The only money that we're going to be getting is through our patrons on Patreon, which is why we're going to reward them so heavily. And sales when the issues start to come out next year. So I was lucky to find someone who's so talented love the story and who is willing to work for love until the money starts to come in, if it ever does. So that has been the inspiration for this comic book project. Tell us about the setting. Is it present, past, alternate reality? The setting is the San Pedro Valley, mostly Tombstone, Arizona. That is where Frankie and her best friend Chloe, who are the main protagonists of the story, live. They live and work in Tombstone. The first story arc does take place a little bit in the Chiricahua mountain range, which is in this area. And just the San Pedro Valley in general is where the story's set. It is mostly set in the present day, although I anticipate there will be some flashbacks to the history of the Thunderbird, which is envisioned in the story as the spirit of the Thunderbird rather than a physical creature. But we will need to delve into history and a little bit of mythology to clear that up as the story unfolds itself. Let's see what else we've got here. Where does the Thunderbird live and what is a Thunderbird? Thunderbird is a creature from Native American mythology. As I said, it is usually depicted as a giant feathered bird, although there have been reports of it being a more pterodactyl type creature. In our story, it is this more of a spirit creature, so its physicality can change, and that may be something that develops as the story goes to have a more physical presence. But right now, it's really the spirit of the Thunderbird. For our purposes, the Thunderbird lives in the San Pedro Valley and in the mountains that encompass the valley. And in Native American mythology, the Thunderbird nests in the mountains. And so we have the Mule Mountains, the Dragoon Mountains, the Chiricahua Mountains, the Whetstone Mountains, the Huachuca Mountains, and the Sierra Madres in Mexico. So there's plenty of area for the Thunderbird spirit to find a home in the San Pedro Valley. Okay, here's another really good question that is probably a really important question because you don't really know a lot about this project yet. What is the general story of Thunderbird? The general story of Thunderbird revolves around our main protagonists, Frankie and Chloe, who are best friends grouped together in Tombstone. Frankie goes out one night to give her dad a ride home and mysteriously disappears. No one hears hiding her hair from her for a year, and when she's found a year later, she has no memory of where she's been in that year. As far as she knows, she was abducted the night before she was found, when it's really been a year. And as she takes a journey to find out what happened to her, she finds out that a lot more than just being abducted happened to her, and that her normal life ended the night she disappeared, and a much more complicated life that is steeped in mythology and the supernatural and magic and myth begins the morning that she's found. And it has a lot to do with the changes that happen to her as a person, to her life, and to her being bound to the spirit of the Thunderbird that will change her life forever and make her into a different person. That and the friendship of Chloe are the main drives in Frankie's world as this comic gets started. Let's see what else we have. How much will native mythology play a part in the story? It's gonna play a large part. I've tried to do a lot of research and will continue to do research. I know Toni's done a lot of research as well and has pointed out some things to me that she thinks would be interesting to include in our telling of this tale. That being said, I'm gonna have to walk a line between historical mythology and what I need to happen in the story, and My main goal is to make it interesting and be respectful of the source mythology that I'm using for the Thunderbird, and I'm pretty confident that I have a lot of resources both online and in this area to make that happen. So hopefully I will be including a lot of native mythology, both as it occurs in history of this area and how I need it to occur to accommodate the story I want to tell. Will this be web, print, or digital download? Will this be a graphic novel or continuous series? This will be a web and physical comic available through Amazon. It will be digital download available as first peek to our patrons of that level. They will receive a digital download before it goes on Amazon, and then it will be available to non-patrons on Amazon, both as a webcomic and as a physical comic that they can order. It's not a one-shot or a graphic novel. We have at least the first story arc, pretty much planned out, and it will be a multi-issue, even if it ends at that first arc, which I don't anticipate it. But this will be a monthly webcomic that we will start publishing next year. We want to get a few issues ahead, of course, so that once we get going, the readers don't have to wait for us to catch up. Right now, we're just doing it out of love for the story, and so that's why we're self-publishing. Hopefully we can get enough patrons on Patreon to be able to make it financially solvent to donate or to dedicate, not donate, to dedicate enough time to get this first few issues out early in the year. If not, they will come out later in the year, but the issues will come out this year, and hopefully we get enough patronage and we get enough sales when the comic is live that equals an interest that we want to keep this story going beyond this first initial arc of what happened to Frankie Dane. And we really both, I hate to speak for Toni, but I can speak for myself and say that I really think there's a story to tell here that we're both very interested in, and that we can tell it in a way that will interest readers, let them not only enjoy it when they see it, but share it with their friends and completely fangirl over it. And, oh my God, you have to read this comic. You'll not believe what just happened. So we're hoping that this will be an ongoing comic for far longer than the initial arc. But that is really up to the fans. So that's why we're trying to get people involved from the ground floor, so that we can make this something that people will want to read, and shape this into something that has a following from the ground up. How do you hope to use the Patreon funding? I'm glad you asked that. That's a great question. As I've said, we're pretty much doing this project out of love. I have a few other self-published works. I'm not going to necessarily plug them here. You can look them up under my name if you wish to. I published those for myself because I had a story to tell and I needed something positive to happen. And so I published the first book, and to my surprise, people read it and wanted the second one. And I actually have people bugging me for the third one right now. But unfortunately, Frankie talks louder in my head than the main character of the other book series. So Frankie's winning right now. But I was absolutely willing to do that. I was willing to work on the books for very little return, just loyal readers, and do it in my spare time, and that's fine. But now I've brought someone on. I have brought Toni onto the project. It's not just me. donating their time and their blood and sweat and tears to this project, and just, you know, I don't expect for her to do that just out of love for the project and the pat on the back when we have readers say that it's good. I feel like if I'm bringing someone in to a project like this, that I need to get them paid. So the main drive behind Patreon is to put money into publicity, pay myself so that I can donate a little more time outside of this just being a hobby, and to pay Toni, because to her this shouldn't just be a hobby, this should be a job. So that was really the point where I said, hey, we need to start building this now, because she's going to have months of work put into this project by the time it goes live, and then it's just if people buy it. And I'm willing to do that for myself, but not for an artist that I've brought on. So that has been the main drive behind the Patreon campaign, and where the money will be going. It will be going toward Patreon rewards, which includes the postcards and all of that publicity materials that we're going to have, and to me being able to make this a profitable thing to do rather than a vanity project, and to get Toni paid, because I know she would do it just for love, but I don't want her to. I want to be able to give her a paycheck and employ her as an artist, because she is a wonderful artist and deserves for this to be her job and not just a hobby. So that's the main drive behind the Patreon campaign. So when we asked for questions on our Facebook page, we had a lot of questions that I feel Toni needs to answer about art and how she's interpreting the story and the mediums that she is using to bring these characters, from the stick figures storyboards that I send her to these beautiful, vibrant people who are going to live in the book. So I'm going to turn those questions over to Toni and let her answer them for you.
Hey there, YouTube. This is Toni with Thunderbird, and I'm here to do my part of the Q&A for Thunderbird Thursday. I'm going to be fielding a lot of the art questions, and so we're going to move forward with that. I'm going to combine those first two questions because they're both kind of the same question in a way, and that's what sources are you drawing from for your art inspiration, and what styles are you basing your work on? I'm not really trying to emulate any one particular style of art. I'm trying to develop my style and my voice as an artist, as opposed to trying to make my art look like somebody else's. I have a lot of admiration for Stjepan Sajic in particular. He's a Croatian artist that I very much like, and I have a couple of his comics that he's worked on. He works for Top Cow, which is pretty cool. I like the sort of underground comic labels. I don't read a lot of comics, which I think is kind of a shame, but that's largely because of funding. I don't have money to have a comic collection right now. But I also have a great admiration for Chris Sanders, who did all the art for Lilo and Stitch, and he's worked for Disney since The Jungle Book, and I really love his sort of sandbag, soft body art style, but it doesn't really fit with the tone of the comic that we're working on now. So I'm really just trying to develop who I am as an artist, as opposed to trying to come close to somebody else. What art supplies do I prefer, and why, and which ones have I tried? I tend to lean more traditional just because I like the feeling of pen on paper, particularly pen. I like pen a lot. That came about recently which it's something because I've been trying to become somewhat ambidextrous, especially in regards to art. So using my non-dominant left hand with a pen really kickstarted a sort of way about art that I never thought about before. Being unable to erase and having to work through the marks that I've already made with a hand that's not doesn't have as strong motor function as my right hand, so there's less mistakes, or there's more mistakes actually, but there's less improperly learned mistakes. There's things that my right hand already does that my left hand doesn't do, which sounds interesting, but I've always looked at it like handwriting. For the first, sometimes their handwriting never gets better, but when you're a child, your handwriting is terrible, and the more you practice, the more you do, the better it gets. So that's the way I'm trying to approach my art. I'm really trying to remind myself that it's not going to be perfect every time I look through. I'm reading Preacher at the moment, and I like to look from issue to issue and see how some of the art changes, some of the differences in guest artists on certain issues and things like that. It's very interesting to see different interpretations of things, and just how one character can look similar, but like two totally different people in two different panels, even though it's the same character. So I'm trying to remind myself that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to, be aesthetically pleasing, and that's what's going to get me through this at the end of the day. I've also tried to work digitally. I'm not as big a fan of it as I am as traditional art. I feel like there's some disconnect between my hand and my eye and the screen and the pad, and it's just something that I have to get used to, something that I have to get more comfortable with, especially if we're going to be publishing this digitally, which I believe that we are. But I'm trying to make it as traditionally looking as possible, because I really feel like you don't see that a lot, especially in modern comics. A lot of things are being converted to digital now, and a lot of things get done digitally. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just not something that I'm super comfortable with, and it's just something I have to get used to. I've just started working in color. I've never really worked in color before. I've always been kind of afraid of it. And I've chosen to work with watercolors because I really like the range of things that I can attempt with watercolor. I started with Derwent Inktense pencils, and those proved to be just a little too vibrant for what I wanted. So I went and got some other watercolor pencils and some water brush pens, and that has made some difference in the way that I work. I've never worked with anything like that before. The pencils are very interesting. I really like the way that I can layer on my colors and then just brush the water right over it, and it makes something really interesting. I decided to use watercolor because, like I said, sorry, that's a whole another question, is what made you decide to use watercolors? I just really, there's always been something super beautiful about colored pencil or watercolor, and the way that they blend together, the way that you can make certain boundaries or barriers or clouds and smoke, stars, you can do anything with watercolors, and you can have a really interesting sort of amoebic background on something with watercolor that just makes the piece really stand out, really pop with a hard line or something like that. So it's just something that's really interested in me, something that I want to try. And Tori really enjoyed the samples that I gave to her, and so I felt really confident in going ahead with that. So hopefully I can produce something that's better than I'm used to producing, and I really hope that I can bring the vision that I have for the color into it with these watercolor pencils. Has it been difficult working on this project with someone across the country? That is a fabulous question. It hasn't been I think because of the way that technology is now, we can talk instantly through text message, Skype, what have you. I can easily send her photographs. I'm also limited somewhat technologically. My computer's not acting correctly right now, but because I'm working traditionally, that makes things a little bit easier for the both of us. Same with her. All her storyboards are done by hand, so she can just send me pictures of them, and so we've been communicating really well that way. And so it hasn't been difficult, but it would be a lot easier if I could just call her up and run down to her house and be like, "Hey, look what I made! I can show you this whole thing in its entirety instead of in small little pieces and pictures." So the closeness isn't necessarily a necessary factor, but it's definitely something that would be handy, but I haven't had a problem working cross-country. Plus, now I have an opportunity to visit Arizona, part of Arizona I've never been to before, so that's pretty fantastic. Okay, another one I've got here is what challenges have you encountered with the story or the art so far? The challenges I've encountered are things like rooms and environments. It's not something that I've ever really painted or drawn before, so that's been a challenge. I'm having to relearn perspective, even though I did spend 4 years in art school. It's something on. I've finally gotten this scale. I have a template now, so that makes things a lot easier because I can work with the size a little bit better. But another thing is just it's a lot more difficult than you would think to actually plan out a page for a comic. It's every bit as intimidating or challenging as filming a movie. Like Tori said, you want to show these people what you're seeing in your head when you hear these things, when you describe or talk about or write these things. And with a comic, not only is the imagery static, so it has to be potent, it has to be powerful, but it also has to be the right angle and the right lighting and the right expression, the right actors, if you will, for what the story you're trying to tell. And it's been a trick catching continuity for certain characters. Chloe's brother Carson is escaping me, and that's been a trick as well. There's a lot of components that go into it. There's a lot of things that I've never learned before that I'm learning on the job, which is, not necessarily the most practical way to learn, especially since we're planning to put issues out next year, but it also requires me to do. I have to, I can't just draw them floating in space. There's a panel I'm working on right now. Frankie's in the hospital, and I can't just draw her sitting in, from the shoulders up, sitting in a room that's somewhat behind her, vaguely represented by, a watercolor shape. I can't do that, so I have to learn how to draw that room. I have to learn how to draw that equipment, and so I do a lot of photo reference, a lot of things like that. It makes things a little bit easier, but it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely something that is very, very interesting, very eye-opening, and when you get like some success with it, the page I'm working on right now, I'm actually quite proud of, not just because it's the first page that I've actually gotten any actual work done on, some work that I feel is good and final, but it's shown me some of the things that I can do that I didn't think I could do before, and I really like that aspect of working on this project as opposed to working on a large painting or a series of prints or things like that.
Okay, so that is the first round of question and answers for Thunderbird Thursday. I know that there have got to be questions that you guys have that didn't get answered today, so we would ask that you leave those questions either in the comments of this video, leave them for us on our Patreon page, or leave them for us on Facebook at Thunderbird Comics. We would love to answer any of your questions. We love talking about this project. And share this with anyone you think would be interested in this story, is interested in indie comics, is interested in anything that we've touched on that you think that they might dig. Then give this video a share. It would help us a lot to get started with that. And that pretty much wraps it up for this first question and answer video. You guys have a great weekend.